Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to plunge into some really complex subjects and hopefully surface with insights that genuinely make you think.
That's the plan.
Today, we're venturing into something pretty unsettling, I have to say, but also, I think, profoundly important. A real deep dive.
Absolutely.
We're going to try and meticulously construct and then examine a hypothetical programming model, basically a theoretical framework,
Right.
looking at how a vulnerable individual, maybe someone starting as a mental health patient, could, under very specific, very deliberate circumstances, be systematically turned into a violent extremist.
And it's crucial to state up front, this isn't about pointing fingers or stirring up fear.
No, definitely not. It's about understanding the intricate, sometimes, frankly, alarming mechanisms that our various sources lay out for us.
Exactly. We're drawing on a lot of different threads here. Research into neurolinguistic programming, the whole science of propaganda, the documented uses of drugs and manipulation, and the, subtle art of hypnosis.
And the really critical piece for today, I think, is connecting those dots to how modern technology, especially something as pervasive as social media, could potentially accelerate this whole insidious process, make it faster, maybe more widespread.
Yeah, that acceleration factor is key. What's truly fascinating and frankly chilling isn't just the individual parts, the NLP, the drugs, whatever. It's how these seemingly disconnected elements, from the biology of belief right up to cutting-edge digital manipulation, how they could theoretically be woven together.
Into a coherent framework, horrifyingly effective, potentially.
Potentially, yes. So our objective here is to meticulously dissect the methods described in the source materials we have. We want to highlight the critical points, the sort of hidden connections, and the cumulative effect.
We're not just listing techniques.
No, not at all. We're digging into the how and, maybe more importantly, the why these techniques could, theoretically, be applied in such a transformative, destructive way. It's like pulling back the curtain on the vulnerabilities we all might have and the sophisticated tools designed to exploit them.
Understanding this theoretical engineering of extremism, as you called it, gives us hopefully some crucial insight into manipulation itself. Okay, so let's start at the foundation. This whole idea, this kind of myth of the blank slate, and how profoundly our environment actually influences us, often more than we realize.
It's a huge shift in thinking, really.
For ages, the prevailing view, scientifically and just, culturally, was that our genes were pretty much destiny. They dictated everything.
Set in stone.
Right. But Dr. Bruce Lipton's work, particularly in the biology of belief, really turns that on its head. He compellingly shows genes don't solely control our biology in that deterministic way.
Which is where epigenetics comes in.
Exactly. This revolutionary field, epigenetics, it reveals how our environment, everything from nutrition, stress, our social world, even our beliefs, profoundly influences how our cells behave and how our genes get expressed. And the key thing is, it does this without changing the actual DNA code.
Think of it like the DNA is the hardware, right? Powerful stuff. But epigenetics, that's the software.
And that software can be updated constantly, rewritten by external input, completely changing how the hardware runs, even though the physical hardware, the DNA, stays the same.
And it's not just for complex creatures like us. The sources point out even single cells learn this way. They create cellular memories from environmental experiences, passing them down.
Like the example of the measles virus. An immune cell doesn't just react, it learns to make an antibody. It activates a new gene to do it.
Right, it adapts. It gets programmed by the experience.
So this fundamental malleability, this biological openness to environmental programming, it's crucial. It tells us our own programming isn't fixed. It can be changed, overwritten.
And potentially hijacked. That's the unsettling part.
Yeah.
And Lipton really hammers this point home. Perceptions, whether they're accurate or inaccurate, equally impact our behavior and our bodies. That's not just like a nice thought. It's biology.
The placebo effect, basically.
The belief effect, yeah. Which is astonishing when you think about it. Sugar pills, easing pain, shrinking tumors, just because someone believes they're getting real medicine.
But our sources say it gets quickly glossed over in medical schools.
Often, yeah. Because it doesn't fit the neat drug-focused model. But what it really shows is this deep, inherent biological vulnerability to what we perceive as real.
So if our perceptions, even false ones, can change our biology.
Imagine the power they have over our minds, our emotions. The brain doesn't always double-check if a strongly held belief matches objective reality. It just runs with it.
This biological tendency to be shaped by belief, That's the ground floor for any manipulation, isn't it?
It's the fertile ground, absolutely.
And you can almost see this vulnerability playing out in characters we all know, like Holden Caulfield and The Catcher in the Rye.
Ah, Holden, yeah.
His whole experience with that negative, alienating environment, all the phoniness he sees, the disappointments it creates, this profound isolation in him, the cynicism, this depression.
He felt rotten and lonesome all the time.
Right. And those intense emotional states, the alienation, the depression, feeling like a victim, that's exactly what could make someone incredibly susceptible, vulnerable to someone offering a new truth or maybe just a sense of belonging he desperately craves.
And it's interesting, one of our sources actually notes the book itself had this huge cultural impact, saying it succeeded in setting the programming into the subconscious of millions of American teenagers.
Wow. So a powerful story, whether it's fiction or propaganda, can tap into those existing vulnerabilities.
And subtly shape worldviews on a massive scale, like a kind of preliminary softening of the mind, preparing it to accept certain ideas later on.
Okay, so if minds can be softened or are already vulnerable, how are potential targets identified?
Well, building right on that idea of susceptibility, we know from our sources that entities like the CIA actually researched this extensively. They were looking for what they termed hypnotically susceptible personalities.
What did that look like? What traits?
It was a whole constellation of traits, really. Things like a readiness to trust, which is key. Also, a relative suspension of critical judgment, meaning they don't question things as much.
Okay.
An ease of affiliation with new experiences, they go with the flow. An excellent memory, surprisingly. A capacity for intense concentration, and overall tractability, meaning they're quite pliable. And then, paradoxically, a rigid core of private beliefs.
Rigid core, that seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it suggests that while they might seem compliant on the surface, once they accept a new idea, they can internalize it very deeply, make it part of that rigid core.
And do they distinguish between personality types?
They did. The research apparently noted that hysterics are always a good hypnotic subject, probably because they're more emotionally open and suggestible.
Makes sense.
Whereas compulsives are the hardest personality type to either hypnotize or to control, maybe because of their own need for control and their rigid structures.
So finding the right person isn't random. It's a calculated search for specific mental predispositions.
Exactly. It's about finding the right canvas for the reprogramming work.
And bringing it back to our hypothetical mental health patient, they might naturally have some of these traits, right? Like the vulnerability could lead to more trust, or distress could lower critical judgment.
Absolutely. Or their existing condition could be deliberately leveraged, perhaps even worsened, to increase that susceptibility.
How so?
Our sources talk about dissociative states of consciousness. We all experience these getting lost in thought, absorbed in a book or TV.
Yeah, where the world just fades out.
Right. In those states, you're naturally more open to suggestion. Your conscious defenses are down. And hypnotism, the sources clarify, isn't some magic switch. It's a continuum. Most people are affected to some degree.
So a mental health patient, maybe someone already prone to dissociation or just getting really absorbed mentally.
They become a prime candidate, almost ideal, in a chilling way. Their natural mental state already makes them more receptive than average.
Okay, so you've identified someone susceptible. What's the next step in this model? Getting them to trust you.
Precisely. The initial psychological softening and trust building. This is where, according to our sources, covert hypnotists were incredibly skilled. They knew the word hypnosis itself could scare people off.
Put their guard up.
Exactly. So they carefully avoided the word hypnosis. Instead, they used what the sources call occult terminology, or just really benign phrases. Concentrations, relaxation exercises.
So instead of I'm hypnotizing you, it's let's do some deep relaxation.
Or let's try a concentration exercise. The source gives an example of a hypnotist named Nielsen doing spiritual exercises with his subject, Palais, calling them magnetic strokings or yogic training in how to cease thinking.
It completely camouflages the intent, makes it seem therapeutic, maybe even spiritual.
Right. It bypasses the rational defenses, makes the subject open up without realizing they're being, well, primed for hypnosis.
And then there's building that basic goodwill, too. The psychological operations manuals mention this.
Yeah, winning trust through seemingly good deeds, like helping people in community work or teaching environmental hygiene.
The stated goal being to arouse the peasant's sympathy.
It sounds cynical, but in the context of our vulnerable individual, imagine a manipulator showing up first as a helper, offering support, an ear, a sense of community to someone feeling lost.
That initial goodwill is critical. It builds that rapport, that trust, before anything more overt starts.
Absolutely foundational. And the sources even describe this really clever technique Nielsen used with Pally. To banish any fear and boost Pally's confidence, Nielsen would sometimes pretend to be completely helplessly under Pally's mental influence during their exercises.
Wow. So the subject feels powerful, in control.
Exactly. Creates a false sense of security, making them even more open, more receptive when the real suggestions start coming. It's quite sophisticated.
Okay, so the groundwork is laid, trust established, the mind softened. Now comes the phase of actually building a new reality, using propaganda and NLP.
That's the next critical stage in this hypothetical model, yeah. Constructing that new reality using primarily propaganda for the external narrative and neurolinguistic programming for the internal wiring.
Let's start with propaganda. The sources talk about a propaganda model. What's that about?
It basically describes how media, whether it's old school or digital, is often shaped by, owners and managers seeking ads who ultimately decide what is to be offered.
So it's not necessarily a free flow of information.
Not always. It can be a very selective presentation of information designed to create a consensus reality. And this manufactured reality then provides the moral basis for certain actions. It defines what's right, wrong, justified.
It builds the walls of their new world.
Precisely. By controlling the information flow, manipulators define the truth for the subject.
And how does this apply directly to radicalizing someone?
Well, those psychological operations manuals are pretty explicit. They advise creating a negative image of the common enemy, not just criticism, but real distortion.
But like calling managers slave drivers or police communist, Gestapo?
Exactly. Those kinds of examples are in the sources. It's a systematic process. Distort perceptions, shift blame, foster intense resentment towards a designated group.
You take their existing frustrations, their alienation.
And you channel it, amplify it, redirect all that anger towards this specific demonized other, making them incredibly receptive to narratives that promise payback or radical change.
All framed within this new truth.
And this propaganda can get really specific, really targeted. Our sources note it can be engineered to incite a race war or go after particular groups.
Like the jihadist discourse example.
Right, framing, say, Muslim women as key figures of this global oppression. And it's not just vague talk. It actively uses and twists things like recent legislations in Western countries, thank you to the job bans in France, to ignite genuine outrage and mobilize people.
So it's not just describing a problem, it's precision engineered to create that powerful us versus them narrative.
Exactly. One side is the victim of terrible injustice, maybe with exaggerated or even faked evidence. The other side is pure evil. This stark split gives a powerful emotional justification for a violent response. Perceived injustice becomes a mandate for action.
The level of distortion can be quite something. Manufacturing consent. That book details how media can twist things, right?
Oh, absolutely. It gives detailed accounts of reversing chronologies, exaggerating protester violence, while totally downplaying police provocation, for example.
So they make the victims look like the aggressors.
Essentially, yes. The example given is a New York Times piece falsely claiming Seattle protesters threw excrement and Molotov cocktails. The correction came way later, quietly, after the damaging narrative was already out there.
And for someone vulnerable, already being programmed, this kind of distortion feels like proof. It justifies extremist actions against the enemy.
It validates their entire radicalized worldview, reinforcing it constantly within that controlled information bubble.
Okay, so that's the external narrative. What about the internal rewiring? That's where NLP comes in.
Exactly. Neurolinguistic programming. This is about getting inside the head and changing the very architecture of thought. NLP's core idea is pretty profound. All our thinking happens in terms of the senses, pictures, sounds, feelings, smells, tastes.
Our mind is just a pattern of nerve connections.
According to this model, yes. Which means the world each person sees and lives in is really the world inside their head. It's a construct.
And if it's a construct,
it's malleable. It's programmable through those sensory-based mental processes. If you change the internal map, you change the individual's reality.
That's unsettling. So what are the tools? How does NLP actually do this?
Well, NLP offers a whole toolkit. Let's touch on a few key ones mentioned in our sources. First up, submodalities.
Submodality.
Yeah, these are the specific qualities of our internal sensory experiences, like, is a mental picture bright or dim, close or far, big or small, color or black and white?
Okay.
By systematically altering these submodalities, a programmer can literally alter their experience, making it more positive, neutral, or negative.
How would that work in this scenario?
Imagine guiding the target to recall a positive memory, maybe family, old friends, or their past life. Then you subtly instruct them, maybe covertly, to dim that picture in their mind, shrink it, push it far away until it's tiny and faded.
Making the past seem less appealing.
Exactly. And conversely, take an image of the enemy or a desired violent act, make it brighter, bigger, closer, more intense. You amplify the negative feelings or the righteous anger associated with it,
But you're subtly eroding their connection to their past identity.
almost without them noticing consciously that they're being detached. It's just minor tweaks to internal imagery.
What else?
Then there's association and dissociation. When you're associated into a memory, you're reliving it intensely, feeling the emotions.
Like you're right there again.
Right, makes the impact more intense. But if you recall it dissociated, like watching yourself in a movie from the outside, it reduces the emotional charge. You're detached.
So the manipulator controls how they experience memories.
Precisely. They can keep the subject dissociated from positive past memories, draining the emotion out of their former life, making it feel distant and irrelevant.
While making them intensely associated with the new radical narrative.
Exactly. Immerse them emotionally in the US versus them story. Make that feel incredibly real, urgent, vital. Create an emotional vacuum for the old life and intense investment in the new one.
Okay, what about anchors?
Anchors are basically triggers, a specific touch, a word, a gesture, even an internal image that gets linked to a specific emotional state, like Pavlov's dogs, but for feelings.
So you could create a touch anchor?
Yeah, the sources mention creating a kinesthetic anchor, a touch anchor. Maybe the programmer consistently touches the subject's shoulder while praising their new extremist identity. Eventually, that touch alone could trigger feelings of confidence, enthusiasm, optimism, and self-regard on demand.
And negative anchors too.
Absolutely. Set triggers for fear or aggression linked to cues about the enemy. It's like installing emotional shortcuts, ready to be activated whenever needed.
And the last one you mentioned was metaprograms.
Right. These are deeper thought patterns, unconscious filters that act as automatic filters that help us make decisions. And importantly, they also filter out any evidence that's contrary to the belief. They protect our existing worldview.
Like being motivated towards goals versus away from problems, or being proactive versus reactive.
These are classic examples. So if a programmer understands the target's specific metaprograms, they can tailor their communication perfectly. They frame messages in a way that slides right past critical thinking because it aligns with the person's natural unconscious filtering system.
Making the new radical beliefs feel natural, like
Yeah.
they came up with them themselves.
Exactly. It feels right because it fits their deepest thinking patterns. Very little internal resistance.
So you combine this targeted NLP with the controlled propaganda.
And the effect is profound. As the sources state, generalization is also how beliefs get formed. Then beliefs filter all the different stimuli coming in. The mind doesn't really get raw information. It no longer gets to choose.
That's terrifying. They lose the ability to critically evaluate anything that contradicts the program.
Essentially, yes. The internal map gets completely rewritten. They see what they're programmed to see, believe what they're programmed to believe. Their entire reality becomes a managed construct, often without them having any conscious clue about the manipulation.
Okay, this is getting progressively darker. So the mind is softened, a new reality is being built. Now we move into deepening the control, using things like drugs, trauma.
Yes, this phase involves moving beyond persuasion into more profound physiological and psychological alteration. Pharmacological assistance drugs plays a significant role here, according to our sources.
How so? Bypassing resistance.
Exactly. Drugs can bypass conscious resistance, break down willpower. The sources mention sodium pentothal, the so-called truth drug.
Used in interrogations, right? Like with William Aarons.
That's the infamous example cited. He claimed his confession was coerced while he was disoriented by the drug. It shows how chemicals can force someone past their conscious defenses, making them incredibly vulnerable to suggestion.
And there's narcohypnosis.
Right, combining drugs with hypnosis to make the reprogramming outcome more predictable, especially potent when you add amnesia suggestions.
So drugs make them pliable, hypnosis implants the commands, and amnesia wipes the memory of it happening.
A terrifyingly effective synergy, yeah. And finding large caches of thorazine in cases like Gary Heidnick's kit. Precisely. And drugs can be used to deliberately induce or enhance these states. push someone into that reactive, less rational mode where they're easier to control, easier to direct towards aggression, or just blind obedience.
You're literally changing their brain chemistry to make them a weapon?
In essence, yes.
Yeah.
And this often goes hand in hand with inducing trauma, amnesia, even personality splitting.
Personality splitting, like creating multiple personalities.
That was a disturbing goal identified in some secretive CIA research programs mentioned in our sources, creating unknowing hypnoprogrammed subjects whose personalities had been artificially split
How?
by inducing deep amnesic trances to achieve automatistic obedience. The person acts without conscious memory or understanding of the command. The aim is to create separate compartments, alters, controllable by the programmer, often without the main personality knowing, fragmenting the self.
That sounds like something out of science fiction, but the sources suggest it was actively researched.
They do. And Dr. William Sargent's work, referencing Pavlov, provides a kind of neurophysiological basis. He noted that certain induced states, hypnoid, paradoxical, and ultra-paradoxical states of brain activity, can cause a splitting of the stream of consciousness.
What are those states?
They're deliberately induced altered states where the mind becomes, say, hyperreceptive or totally disoriented or even able to hold contradictory ideas at once. The brain's normal integration breaks down.
Making it possible to isolate thoughts, memories, behaviors.
Exactly. Walling them off from the main consciousness, creating these deeply embedded pockets of programming that operate without question because the core self can't even access them.
Are there real-world examples that seem to fit this?
The sources point to John Wayne Gacy. He claimed an alter personality named Jack Hanley committed the murders, and that he himself had no memory at all of most of them. That aligns disturbingly well with amnesic splitting and controls alters.
And the CIA actually explored if this could be permanent.
According to the sources, yes. They looked into whether personality splitting and hypnoprogramming could be made irreversible. The goal wasn't just temporary control, but fundamentally altering someone's identity forever.
This also highlights how fragile memory is in these states, doesn't it? The risk of confabulation.
Huge risk. Confabulation is where the mind basically invents memories to fill gaps, especially under hypnosis or during trauma recovery. The person genuinely believes these false stories. The unconscious may produce preposterous tales, if not guided carefully.
So false beliefs, false memories can be implanted intentionally or not.
Easily. Cementing that new, constructed reality, making deprogramming incredibly hard because their whole perceived history might be fiction that feels utterly real. One source even warns that a subject capable of unethical hypnosis might end up believing their own unconscious fabrications.
Oh, okay. Alongside the drugs and trauma, there's also this idea of eroding morality, breaking down boundaries.
Yes, another crucial step. Our sources, looking at analyses of occult practices, talk about how one's God-given sense of morality can be deliberately extinguished by the destruction of normal, natural boundaries.
Ow! By sowing confusion.
Exactly. Introducing concepts that destabilize fundamental norms. The sources give the example of teaching boys they are girls and girls that they are boys. The aim isn't just challenging norms, it's shattering the framework of right, wrong, self, other.
Creating psychological disorientation.
Making them far more susceptible to accepting a new radical moral code provided by the programmer.
And the sources connect this boundary breaking to actual violence.
Chillingly, yes. They link this confusion to creating a sense of entitlement or karma that allows for horrific acts like rape, murder, and torture, and even the destruction of families.
Because their moral compass is gone.
Dismantled. Replaced with a new, twisted code where heinous actions are seen as justified, maybe necessary, or even righteous within their new belief system. It's a critical step in desensitizing someone, removing those innate restraints against violence.
Making the unthinkable thinkable and doable.
Precisely. And we even see hints of this subtle moral erosion in literature. Back to Holden Caulfield, he's exposed to talk about perverts, the idea you could turn into one practically overnight.
Right.
And the sources note how forbidden homoeroticism is introduced, often followed by a place of relief for Holden. This subtle pattern, exposure followed by resolution, might subconsciously normalize taboo ideas.
Preparing the mind for bigger moral breakdowns later.
Potentially. Gradually making the individual more open to discarding established ethics when under more direct manipulative pressure. It's a slow, insidious softening of moral lines.
Okay, so we've reached the final phase in this hypothetical model. The individual is primed, reality reshaped, morality eroded. Now it's about activation, turning them into the actual extremist actor.
Exactly. Activation and mobilization. transforming the vulnerable patient into a compliant, maybe even zealous extremist. A key technique here is triggering compulsive obsessions.
How does that work?
Psychological warfare cadres, the sources detail, create temporary compulsive obsessions in mass concentrations or group meetings by hammering on specific or selective topics.
Hammering, like relentless repetition.
Relentless repetitive conditioning, often through structured conversations, curated media. The goal is to build intense internal pressure, a laser focus on a grievance or an enemy.
Like winding up a psychological spring?
Good analogy. Coiled tight, ready to snap into general violence at the decisive moment. It's about making the action feel not just possible, but compelled.
And this violence needs to feel justified.
Absolutely. That's where, for instance, armed propaganda teams come in, as described in guerrilla warfare contexts in our sources. They provide a stage-by-stage persuasive planning program.
How do they frame the violence?
Crucially, they present arms as the strength of the people against a repressive regime, not just the power of the guerrillas themselves. It reframes violence as liberation, self-defense, righteous retribution.
So the subject feels they're fighting for a noble cause.
Exactly. Transforms programmed rage into a sense of duty. Their extreme actions become morally imperative within that twisted framework.
And how is obedience actually automated? Made reliable?
Through things like post-hypnotic suggestions. These are commands given during trance, but designed to be carried out after the person seems wide awake and normal.
So they act on the command, but look like they're just acting normally.
Right. They're directed to act wide awake and normal while obeying. Conceals the trance, conceals the manipulation, both from the subject and from others, makes the extremist action look like it came from their own free will.
And reinforcement is key to making this stick.
Absolutely critical. Remember those 8 basic steps of human hypnosis. The final step is reinforce the given lesson until it becomes automatic.
So once trained, always trained.
That's what the literature suggests.
Ew.
A hypnotic subject is always a trained hypnotic subject. The programming doesn't just vanish, it lies dormant, ready to be reactivated.
By specific cues, a word, a gesture.
Exactly. Designated triggers can quickly rehypnotize a trained subject. This deep, repeated training ensures the responses are ingrained, accessible, and can be activated efficiently. Turns the individual into a reliable tool.
The sources also mention creating an artificially induced superego. What does that mean?
Think of the superego as our conscience, our internalized ideals. In this context, it means creating a split in the unconscious, where a new, programmed part identifies with the hypnotist and acts as the hypnotist.
So the programmer's will becomes the subject's internal moral compass.
Effectively, yes. The subject genuinely believes they're acting on their own convictions, their own sense of right and wrong, but they're actually enacting the programmer's will, having fully internalized that extremist value system.
And this allows for unleashing extreme aggression, the inner beast.
That chilling phrase comes up in the sources, yeah. Along with other dehumanizing language, sin nature, natural man, silly woman, witches inside. This rhetoric strips targets of humanity.
Making violence easier to commit.
Much easier. If your enemy isn't human, atrocities become possible. This language, combined with calls for obedience and sacrifice, prepares the subject psychologically for extreme violence against designated targets.
And the sources even give practical, terrifying advice, like the CIA Assassin Manual.
Yes, advising assassins to use simplest local tools or weapons of opportunity. Hammers, axes, knives, even lamps. Mundane items turn deadly.
That practical instruction, combined with the deep psychological conditioning,
makes the subject a potent, unpredictable weapon, ready to use whatever's at hand. And the sources link this to real-world horrors, ritualized homicides in the Bay Area with witchcraft symbols, the Atlanta child murders potentially linked to a cult involved in trafficking and Satanism.
Examples of organized, directed violence where individuals might have been manipulated like this.
It underscores the terrifying potential of such a programming model actually being implemented.
Okay, so that's the hypothetical model using more traditional methods. But you mentioned technology acts as an accelerator. How does social media and modern tech streamline all this?
Exponentially, potentially.
Yeah.
The first big way is tailored propaganda and echo chambers. Social media algorithms are basically designed for this, even if unintentionally.
By maximizing engagement.
Right. They filter information, creating personalized feeds that just relentlessly reinforce whatever you already believe, or critically, whatever new beliefs have been implanted.
So it constantly builds and solidifies that world inside their head we talked about with NLP.
Exactly. Makes their perception of reality more insular, more self-validating, completely controlled. Like the sources said, The mind no longer gets to choose its information. The algorithm chooses. It's a digital cage for belief.
And identifying targets becomes easier too, like the armed propaganda teams finding people on the ground.
Far easier and far more precise. Online data collection mirrors and vastly surpasses that. Every click, like, share, comment, even how long you linger on a post, it all builds a digital footprint.
Which can be analyzed to find vulnerable people.
With incredible precision. Analyzing interests, emotional responses online, social connections, you can pinpoint individuals susceptible to specific narratives or grievances. Then you hit them with highly personalized messaging.
Delivering the exact right propaganda to the exact right person at the exact right time.
Bypassing all the old gatekeepers. Dramatically speeding up radicalization.
Beyond overt propaganda, what about more subtle methods? Subliminal messaging.
Technology enables that on a massive scale. The sources discuss subliminal advertising, images flashed faster than sight that the conscious mind misses, but the brain registers.
And audio subliminals too. Hidden messages in sound.
Yes, messages embedded in music or background noise that your conscious mind doesn't get, but your brain gets. It's covert influence, shaping perceptions, emotions, attitudes without any conscious awareness or resistance.
Programming that completely bypasses critical thinking.
Implanting ideas straight into the subconscious.
And NLP principles can be baked into social media content itself.
Absolutely. Think about crafting posts using specific language patterns, predicates, metaphors, story structures designed to manipulate those internal submodalities or target-specific metaprograms.
So, subtly changing how people feel about things just through the way content is presented.
Precisely. Using AI now, you could even analyze which visual cues, colors, brightness, or audio cues, tone, music get the desired emotional response, then craft content accordingly. Dimming images linked to their old life in videos they watch, using language that triggers away from motivation when showing the enemy.
It's like a constant, low-level rewiring of their inner world delivered right to their phone.
Guiding behavior without them even realizing they're being nudged.
Okay, now for the really cutting-edge, maybe even sci-fi sounding stuff, brain print technology.
Yeah, this is highly theoretical, based on the sources, but deeply unsettling. The idea is that maybe, just maybe, something like NSA signals intelligence could decode the resonance frequency of each specific brain area, like a unique electrical signature for different brain parts.
A brain print.
Right. And the theory goes, if you could map that precisely, could you then modulate that frequency to somehow impose information? Or even insert a thought directly into the brain?
Bypassing language, images, everything.
That's the terrifying theoretical potential. Direct thought insertion. It would represent the ultimate form of control, bypassing all conscious resistance. Highly speculative, but the fact it's even discussed in the sources shows where this could go.
And what about radiated inductions, making hypnosis remote?
Another theoretical possibility suggested by the sources, instead of close-up hypnosis, could advanced tech deliver hypnotic cues covertly, remotely, maybe through specific frequencies, sound patterns, visual stimuli hidden in digital media.
Turning hypnosis into an automated, distant, invisible force.
Potentially. Inducing trance or planting suggestions without the person knowing the source or intent. The reach would be instant, global, unseen.
And finally, how does technology gamify the whole process? Make radicalization almost like a game.
Well, those PSYOP manuals mention using group dynamics and self-criticism for teaching guerrillas, building cohesion. Social media platforms are masters at recreating and amplifying these dynamics online.
Through likes, shares, comments, online communities.
Exactly. Fostering this intense sense of belonging, shared purpose, reinforcing radical views through shared content, interactive challenges, fierce peer pressure. The platform's own engagement mechanisms, streaks, rewards can turn passive followers into active recruiters, then into combatants.
All within this seemingly harmless digital space.
Yeah, it's almost like the idea mentioned in the sources about Mickey Mouse being television brainwashing, subtly implanting values generation after generation.
Social media does that, but maybe faster, more powerfully.
Arguably, yes. Through gamified interfaces, constant feedback loops, pervasive curated figures. Think about the figure of the armed and veiled fighting women being omnipresent in social media in extremist circles, as the sources note.
Creating enthusiasm, acting as recruitment tools.
Powerful ones. Transforming casual users wrapped up in the scrolling, engaging digital experience into active participants in extremism. The line between engagement and indoctrination just gets terrifyingly blurry. Hashtag tag outro.
So what does this all mean? We've just gone through this incredibly detailed deep dive into a hypothetical but Really profoundly unsettling programming model. We've tried to map out a theoretical path from a vulnerable starting point, maybe a mental health patient, to a violent extremist.
And we've seen how this intricate web, this interlocking system of psychological manipulation, calculated propaganda, and maybe most alarmingly now, sophisticated modern technology, how it could all be woven together.
Yeah, from Lipton's Epigenetics showing our biology is actually quite malleable.
To the nuts and bolts of NLP reshaping our inner world.
The chemical interventions of drugs breaking down resistance.
The deep damage of trauma and hypnosis splitting identity.
And then this massive accelerant, social media emerging tech like the theoretical brain print. It just lays bare the fragility, maybe, of our own perception, the power of external influence.
It really does. And it raises this huge question for all of us, doesn't it? Especially living in this digital age. How do we even know what's real? How do we discern reality when our very perceptions, that world inside our heads, can be so meticulously engineered, so subtly built by forces we might not even see?
Yeah.
And the goal here, like we said at the start, isn't about fear. It's about fostering a really informed awareness. Understanding these mechanisms, even hypothetically, gives us crucial insight into our vulnerabilities and the sophistication of manipulation today.
Knowing how reality can be messed with is maybe the first step to protecting it.
It has to be.
Which leaves us with a final thought. Provocative one, maybe? Given what the sources suggest about the inherent programmability of the human mind and this pervasive, often invisible technological influence trying to shape us constantly, what are the ethical responsibilities of those who control information communication platforms?
That's a massive question.
And maybe more personally, for everyone listening, how can we as individuals cultivate more mental resilience, stronger critical thinking, a more robust, independent inner world to guard against manipulation, especially when our minds are under this constant, sophisticated pressure to be reprogrammed?
It really comes down to that, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the challenge we leave you with is this. How do you protect your inner world when the outer world seems constantly trying to reshape it?